Hello and welcome to Pale Reflections, a proud member of the Duff Network where we reflect for the first time on Wildbow's most reflected work as it releases. I'm Ruben Morehouse.
And I, for the first time today, Elliot Diebold.
First take, hot, fresh, coming right at you live. We're in the Discord and everyone's here right on time. We're right on time, first time, every time. How are we all doing?
Huzzah.
Huzzah.
What housekeeping things did we do?
It's because we're not
there won't be a live recording
next week.
Yes.
We made a joke about it's going to be 40 minutes of science. We've heard it all before. Let's keep moving. Come on. Hey, Elliot, we're in what I like to call, and this is a pretty good joke. I don't know if you've heard of it before, Elliot. What I like to call the countdown to the comet.
Oh, is that a reference to something?
Yeah, I'm not sure. It might be. Where we're counting down.
I think maybe you made it up. I'd take credit for it.
Yeah, and I do every day. Every day I wake up and I say to Penny, "Hey, I came up with this thing." And she says, "Am I in some kind of 51st Dates scenario? What's going on?" No,
great movie. Great movie.
It is a good movie. We're in the lead up to our long 24+ hour live stream. So if you want to find out more about that, you can go to duffmedia.com/APU2. But hey, you can also participate. There are a few segments that are looking for audience participation. You can submit memes that you like, fan art that you like, items that you think look weird and you want us to tell you what magic they have in them. All those things you can find submission forms for at duffmedia.com/contribute. And yeah, be a part of history.
And we'll probably be periodically adding stuff to that as well. It's worth saying.
Yeah, we'll probably add another one this week, I think.
Yeah, I need to put the survey for Familiar Feud up there. So I can get the 100 responses.
Yes.
And I don't know when that'll go up there, but that'll be the place where it is.
Yep. But yeah, cool. So go there, duffmedia.com/contribute and find all that jazz. Any other housekeeping before we start this very fun epilogue, Elliot?
No, I don't think so. Yeah, just, no live recording next week. And, I guess it was in the last one, but my apologies for those who don't listen live for how late the episode on the third epilogue is. It will be on the feed. Well, I guess if you're listening to this, it's already on the feed, but my apologies, it was so late.
Mm-hmm.
Live listeners, I don't apologize to you because these are all fine. So
yeah,
get over yourselves.
Yeah, we lost the episode, Elliot, but then we went to this strange corporate headquarters today and found it again.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Now, I tried to make that joke about 4 times in the previous recording, but I kept cutting out, so I'm glad it's finally come across.
Well, let's get into the wait.
So we're talking about Loose Ends E4, an Avery chapter, and this chapter opens with Avery making some solid objections. We're 3 months later, and Declan's being awakened, whatever, something.
I think just awakened at this point. For now,
yeah, and he'll get awakened if he does his homework and stops being an incel.
Yeah, they're pivoting him from the alt-right pipeline to the Kennett practitioner pipeline, which is defo's an upgrade.
I think it's a great idea. I think, I wish we had magic in the real world so that we could use it to de-radicalize alt-right members.
Well, I do think Avery kind of tries to make the point because Declan has that bit where he has the speech where he basically says, "I was becoming an incel because I didn't see what else there was to be."
Yeah,
and Avery does sort of keep. But... Yeah, well, Avery sort of keeps jutting in. She's like, "I mean, there are other options that aren't magic. The book is very clearly sort of making a statement a bit like you don't need magic. I mean, magic obviously makes it easier, but."
Gamers become incels because there's no magic. Wildbow's confirmed it, and I think we all knew it all along, but it's good to finally have tangible confirmation.
But no, I love this is a chapter that is very much hammering in on how far Avery has come from her low point before the story, and obviously we straight up see some of how close she was to being lost. But I think it's really fun that in the chapter that is addressing that thread quite explicitly, we open it with this conversation that is Avery essentially protesting because she's been ignored. Kelsey and Connor essentially saying, "Oh, we specifically didn't ask you because we knew you'd be against this. We're doing this despite you, quite intentionally."
Yeah, but
And Avery is here, like, making a fuss about it, and I'm like, wow, that is so far from where Avery was like a year ago that it's like, kind of this weird thing where it's like, yeah, we had to go around you because your voice is too loud on this.
but it's such a fun, like, it's because the problem was they weren't intentionally leaving Avery out, you know, pre-story. It was because
Yeah.
they were just kind of overwhelmed and the family was chaotic and they didn't kind of have a handle on things. But here it's parents making a decision as parents very
Yes.
intentionally,
Yeah.
and I think that's great.
Yeah, like it is fundamentally different and doesn't feel anywhere near as wrong. But it's like it's this funny contrast because it's not like, the basic thing, like, if I was the author of this story, it would be a lot simpler and it'd be like, look how together Avery is with them now. It's like this fun.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
such a funny example to be like, no, we're contrasting this by showing how they're explicitly ignoring Avery on purpose this time because I mean, and we sort of see she's going to be wrong about this, but
Mm.
it's like it's this weird, like, she's getting the attention through them avoiding her, and that's just like such a funny way to open this chapter that is kind of closing this thread.
Yeah, 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 100%.
I sorry, I also wanted to. I fucking love that the core of Kelsey's argument right at the start here is she's like, well, we asked Miss, and Miss thinks it's a good idea to Aware and Declan. And that's such a funny argument because Avery tries to, like, work against it and she's got no legs because Kelsey's like, I'm sorry, are you saying that Miss isn't good at this? Like, are you saying that the argument you've made for your whole awakening process isn't valid? Like, it's such a dick move to get Miss's blessing on Awarening Declan because it completely shuts down any ability Avery has to argue against it. It's so funny.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I think it's a really fun theme. I mean, like, we're in Avery's head this chapter, and I think we're pretty much, or at least I was, like, at the same place Avery is in this chapter, where at the start you're kind of like, oh, this feels like it's not necessarily a good idea. But Declan kind of proves himself in this chapter enough to make it clear that it was a good idea in hindsight. And I think it's kind of fun to be fully blasting on Declan in this early part of the chapter, but he does do well. And yeah,
Yeah.
Miss knows how to pick him, I guess.
See, I think I've been arguing for Awarening Declan being a good thing for ages, so I was just kind of
Mm,
hyped that it was happening and was a good thing. But, like, definitely, I like, you're right that it's an important part of that is the story reminding us how bad the path he's currently walking is at the start. And, like, there's some
mm.
funny stuff here where, like, Sheridan and Avery are, like, annoying the shit out of each other here, and then the second it turns to,
Well,
like, Awarening Declan,
I don't think
suddenly they're allies.
I don't think Avery is annoying Sheridan.
Well, fair. I mean, she does by existing because she's a sister.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
But yeah, no, but it's like, like, there's a lot of really fun family energy in this chapter, as there
Mm,
always is when all the Kellys get together. But I like a big part of that I love is, like, Sheridan and Avery are kind of at each other's throats, and then we find out they're wearing Declan, and they're just suddenly both completely on side and, like, snarking together,
mm,
sharing looks. And it's
yeah,
like it's just that sibling energy of, like, oscillating between being mortal enemies and best friends, like, over a matter of seconds.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
just
It's very fun
so funny.
family dynamic, isn't it? So you
Yeah.
said you'd been kind of predicting that this would be a great way to break Declan out of his mold. How would you say you're feeling about that now that that's confirmed?
Good, right?
No,
I don't know where you're
yeah,
going with
no,
this.
no. But you've written a word
Oh,
in the
smug.
notes.
Yeah.
Smug. Speaking of Smug, they've got a new character, Smug, and he's here too, and he's a pretty fun pick for a familiar, isn't he?
Oh, he's so good.
Do you think he's a goblin? I mean, like, he's got such goblin vibes, but then again, Sheridan just has such goblin vibes that I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Maybe
And
I'm really sad that we missed the tale of them meeting because I feel like that would be delightful to see.
I just assumed this was her boon
Boon
companion from the
companion,
Forest Ribbon
yeah,
Trail
yeah,
because he turns into a raccoon, and
yes.
so raccoons are already probably even more goblin adjacent than opossums.
Well, but a raccoon is probably what a goblin might turn into as a kind of animal
Oh, for
form
sure.
for a familiar anyway. So
Yeah.
it's not conclusive, I think.
I guess the Forest Ribbon Trail thing is the only other thing that makes sense to me for, like, the parents and stuff being okay with Sheridan doing a familiar ritual within 3 months of awakening.
Yeah, it's pretty quick, isn't it?
Yeah, and, I think that's the case, but, like, I definitely agree. Like, the goblin energy, I think, comes from the fact, like, a boon companion is essentially one third the person, aka Sheridan, so that's 1/3 goblin. Then it's 1/3 the animal, that's a raccoon, so that's another third goblin, and then 1/3 lost, which is already kind of 50% goblin. So,
Yeah, so
he's
we're
sitting
about
at about 3/4
85%
goblin.
goblin. Yeah. Yeah, fair. Yeah,
Um, but
very quick for a familiar ship.
yeah, but he's like, I love how Smudge and also Snowdrop when she shows up, they just feel like other Kelly siblings at this point. Like, I love that Smudge and Snowdrop are almost used to replace Declan and Kerry and even Rowan to a degree, where it's like they're play fighting. There's like the bit where Kelsey and Con have to be like, "Can you not do this in the kitchen, please? Like, go into the dining room and don't make a mess." And
And
Snowdrop's like,
they do.
yeah, but they're like, don't make a mess, and Snowdrop's like, no promises. Or she says
Mm.
promise, which for her means no
Yes.
promises. But like that just feels like another pair of 10-year-old kids that these parents have adopted. One of the big things this chapter is doing is showing us that like this unified, coherent Kelly family that now exists that didn't at the start of the story. And I love that one of the ways again that we're doing that is like now they've got these two extra kids, and they seem like they're kind of the fucking worst, but
Mm.
they just they fit in, and it's great.
Yeah, 100%. The family energy is so strong in this chapter, and that's
Yeah.
kind of part of it, right? Um,
Mm.
as we'll get to
I,
later.
I do wonder, like, if we assume that Smudge is like Sheridan's Forest Ribbon Trail boon companion,
Mm.
do you think they like specifically went and got
Got a
like a
raccoon.
raccoon for Sheridan? Because
Mm.
I can just imagine the conversation where maybe I just for some reason imagine they got Verona involved, especially because she found Snowdrop. But I
Mm.
can imagine it's like, what sort of animal do we want to get? Like, it has to be a virgin, blah blah blah. And it's like, what animal suits Sheridan? A
Mm.
raccoon.
Yeah. Yeah,
Like that
100%.
just feels like a conversation that definitely happened.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think it would be so fun to have seen. But, oh well. Can't see all the fun parts. The story's got to end sometime.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. And like Sheridan and Smudge are just so like great. They're just such shit stirrers. Like
Yeah.
it's horrifying to imagine living in a house with a Sheridan who has like a faithful ally and Smudge, like as if she wasn't annoying enough already.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, it's just more yeah, just more of Sheridan.
Yeah, which was like a nightmare fuel.
Yeah. So B, Wint, and Raquel come by the house as part of the Declan intervention. And yeah, it's kind of wild that B is here, although I guess her and
Yeah.
Declan have a history, but it's very interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I don't quite understand. Obviously, this doesn't go the way Connor and Kelsey wanted it
Yes.
to, but I don't quite understand what their version was that had B/Raquel joining in at some point. Like what?
Yeah, I'm kind of picturing in my head that they have the bit with Declan where they're like, hey, Declan, you're turning into a little shit.
Yeah,
With carrot stick, blah blah blah, all that stuff. But guess what? We're about to introduce you to something really cool, and then the doorbell rings right on time, and in come magicians, and Declan's like, "Oh shit!" But yeah, no, having them there to kind of shame him is quite fun. It's like, I mean, he kind of deserves it though, right?
oh
Like,
yeah,
I kind of want him to have the moments of lying awake thinking about what a fuckwit he was.
yeah.
That's the price that he's got to pay.
Well, that's what, maybe the original goal was we do the stuff, we like introduce him to Can It Found, it's magic, blah blah, and it's like now here's the person who's going to be your chaperone, who
Oh,
like
that would be
is
very
is
funny.
your like person to ask questions to, and like B walks in the door,
Yeah,
and
that
like
would have been
that would have
very
been funny.
good. Yeah. See, I could
Like
see
she
that.
knows more than you. She's now in charge of you. Off you
Mhm.
go.
Yeah. But yeah, Declan, good times. Good character.
Yeah, well, he's getting there. I do love Sheridan's role in this Declan intervention,
Mm.
um, where like basically her parents are like beating around the bush and sort of slowly working their way, treading towards the point they want to make, and Sheridan just sort of interrupts and it's just like, you're a little
Let's cut
cunt.
to the
Everyone hates
chase.
you.
Yeah.
Like we need you to change.
Yeah.
And it's like that very Goblin Kelly sibling energy. But it's also like one of the things that stood out to me on the second read is like Declan when he first walks in, they're sort of beating around the bush and they're like, we don't want to talk about private matters, like blah blah blah. And Declan's like, oh, we're talking about my ADHD. And like Avery sort of thinks to herself, "Oh, trust Declan to like just interrupt when we're all trying to talk around stuff and be polite." And in retrospect, I'm like, maybe Sheridan like was actually thinking it through like this because like maybe that like Declan doesn't want to beat around the bush like this. You know what I mean? Like, and we've seen like Sheridan was the Kelly who best handled Avery as Avery was coming out the first time and all that. And like, I think there's just this layer. I think Sheridan might actually be the Kelly who's probably the best at like this sort of interaction with other people and like knowing what they need. Because Declan maybe is kind of establishing he needs like he just wants it all laid out bare, and that's kind of what Sheridan does. And like his parents don't like it, but obviously it ends up working. And part of me is like maybe Sheridan should be the Kelly who's responsible for their relations, like they're Milton because she
Yeah.
actually seems to be the best people person, despite.
Well, I think she's good at a specific type of it, which is the goblin-esque, cut to the chase, no bullshit kind of stuff.
She was pretty good at being there for Avery in a
Yeah,
different
that's
way. Like
true.
I agree, that's definitely her strong suit. But also, I mean, again, I think the Kelly relation manager, like that suits the Kelly family vibe of their relation manager
Mm,
being somebody who just cuts the shit.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, now that they're a family dynasty, they need to have a head of relations, and
Yeah.
putting Sheridan in that role would be a choice.
I mean, yeah, yeah. I wouldn't throw her straight to the wolves on her own, but like, I don't know, just moments like how she handled Avery, and then here, I actually think she does really well by following Declan's lead and cutting the shit that the rest of the family is trying to talk around, and like, yeah, like I don't know, I think Sheridan is consistently turning out to be the Kelly who once everyone's trying to put their feet in the water, she's the best at actually diving in and swimming well.
Yeah, yeah. Um,
Oh. Sorry, I also want to call out because Raquel's obviously here too because it seems like she's B's supervisor. Um, and Avery specifically frames it a bit as like, yeah, Raquel is helping like B integrate into normal society. And I was like, what a fucking indictment on B's ability to blend in with society that Raquel is her expert, you know?
yeah.
That's like going to Brett for parenting lessons, you know? Like just
Yeah, it's not great. But yeah, so we then cut to a flashback. It's the night that the Carmine died, and Avery is kind of being lost by her family, but is found by Miss.
Yeah, and this is a fascinating inclusion. I can't be there. I did not see this coming, and like even as it's happening, it sort of takes a while before you're 100% sure it's a flashback.
Yes, yes,
And honestly, there was a period where I thought it was a nightmare. Because I could tell something was off, but I didn't know what, and I was like, "Oh, maybe this is a nightmare." And I was like, "Wildbow's trying to get us with one last fucking nightmare before this story ends."
one last
Um,
Alpy bit.
I mean, he's still got a couple of chapters to do that in, but
Yeah,
yeah, like because it's fun because it takes a while before it sort of explicitly becomes a flashback. But there are like all these warning signs that made me unsettled in a way. Like I knew something was off, but I couldn't tell what. But like Avery was just not clicking, and like some of the stuff with the family. There's all these little details. I love the delivery of this where it's just this like slow realization as you're reading this, like something is wrong, but I don't know what. And then you find
yeah,
out it's a flashback, and this is when Avery was at her lowest.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Because we go straight into more chaotic Kelly family vibes, or like Avery immediately thinking like, "Oh, that was just chaotic," that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's kind of like, "Oh, it was chaotic," but it seems like she had a really strong reaction to that. And then you're like, "Oh, okay, it's a flashback." Um,
Yeah. Oh, and this is one of the this is when it was like the bad chaotic, like she's getting
yes,
lost in it,
exactly.
whereas yeah, she's yeah, yeah.
But yeah, so I don't know. What do you make of this? Like, it's really fun to see this. It's a part of Avery's origin story that we hadn't seen. But
Yeah.
yeah, what do you think?
But why?
What is the purpose of having this in the epilogue? Do you think, Elliot?
I reckon like my take is like a big part of it is I think a lot of this chapter is Avery sort of realizing that Declan is not that far from where she was back here. He's just expressing it in a very different way, but like this sort of comes to the to the speech she gives in the next part of the chapter, like that we already talked about. But like that whole thing where he was kind of becoming an incel just because he didn't really know what else to do, and that was like
Yeah,
the only option that was kind of giving him a sense of purpose.
yeah,
Um, and it's like that's just it's very very similar to what was happening with Avery, and we see that like Avery. She directly calls out in this segment that like Declan questions why are you even here, and she's like, yeah, that's a question that I've struggled with. And like this chapter is kind of Avery realizing that Declan's struggling with that a bit too, and it's like he's getting lost in his own way, which is falling down this bad path, whereas Avery's flavor of getting lost was with a capital L and being alone. But like I think it's really fun then to, if we're focusing on the fact that what's happening to Declan isn't actually that different to Avery, it's a really interesting moment to then cut back and see how Miss handled doing this, because now obviously Avery is kind of Declan's Miss.
Mm.
And yeah, it's this like interesting, I guess, way to rapidly do a bit of a bookend of like, this was Avery at her lowest when she needed this, and then we
Yeah.
cut to Avery at her best doing it to someone like Declan, who is like an even tougher case than she was to pull back onto a good path. And so it just like it kind of highlights. It's a simple way to highlight like this huge journey Avery's made, and then also kind of show us why Declan is in need of the same thing.
Mm. Yeah. 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 I like that. It's Avery was showing us how where Avery was and how she was pulled out, which we kind of already knew, but explicitly tying that back to where Declan is / was and how he was pulled out.
Yeah, and like because like what Avery sort of focuses on at the in the flashback is the bit that really gets her right at the end is the part where Miss tells her she won't be doing this alone. Like
Mm.
you know, like we already sort of knew this, but the big thing for Avery was not that magic was real; it was that I'm going to have friends, and they're not going to be allowed to leave me because of magic. But like the magic was the secondary part, and like I think that's a really interesting note because that's how that segment ends, and then we cut to Declan in Can It Found, and it's like bringing us through with that note of like, oh yeah, the magic isn't the point really, and that's sort of what Avery tries to explain to Declan with all this, and that's where the purpose stuff comes in. But it was like, yeah, like it's reminding us that the thing that really drew Avery into this world at the time, it's not the magic, it's the stuff that the magic gives you.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, Avery takes Declan to Can It Found and gives him a basic explanation of the options in front of him.
Yeah, and he takes to this like a fish to water, which I mean isn't really surprising, but yeah,
Yeah. It's
he just is instantly like clocking on to so many dynamics.
yeah, and immediately like clicking or like, oh, the thing that you asked me about, that was part of this too, and like kind of connecting all
Yeah,
these dots, which I think is great and really demonstrates how quickly he takes to it. And yeah, speaking as somebody who's awkward and loves video games and puzzles, I would also love to be, brought into Magic. It's like a direct parallel of like, I love games. Paths are like video games. You figure out the
yeah,
rules, you figure out how to play and exploit them. It's like very up the alley, although of course dangerous.
yeah. For me, see, I'm definitely like in that same realm as Verona, where I'm like, I love paths, but it's the physical side of them that kills it for me. Like, I would love to be gaming on the paths, except even if I got fit again, it's like I've just never been a runner. Like, I guess give me the swimming paths. I'll swim around the underwater paths or something. But like, that's just my worst nightmare is like all the running involved in the paths.
Mm, yeah.
Like I actually think like talking about Verona and how like because Verona is clearly she's very compatible with the paths except for the running part. We see that Wondercand has that floor of people who very specifically are like the managers that strategize for the paths and kind of
Yes.
mostly they're allowed to mostly send other people to do the actual running of them.
Mm.
There's definitely an alternate timeline where Verona finds her way to Wondercand and succeeds a lot in the company in roles like that because
Oh yeah.
like that is perfect for Verona is putting her in a job where it's just like figure out these weird path puzzles, but you don't actually have to do the running around part.
Well, yeah. Except for the fact that I think the structure of Wondercand would break Verona.
I could see her falling into it though,
Oh yeah.
especially with all the stuff around like the body augmentations. Like the early story Verona can be lured
Yeah.
in by
True.
like
True.
stuff to like stop you needing to sleep as much. Like all those perks, I think people like Verona early in the story are exactly the sort of people that those perks trick into joining.
Mm.
Um, where it's like they give you the illusion that that will fix the problems you're having.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that more when those come up. But like, I definitely not the Verona at the end of the story here, but first half of the story, Verona, 100% could see her ending up as a Wondercanned middle manager.
Yeah. Yeah. I could see it, I suppose.
Yeah. The other thing in this section I did really want to talk about was Connor and Kelsey do this like negotiation with B to for her to be Declan's like, I guess they use the term acquaintance. I don't know what to call it. His like
handler,
yeah,
friend, somewhere.
but like I love that thing. Like Kelsey has that great moment where she's like, I want Declan to trust you more than I want you snitching on every detail of him. It's that great, that thing you hear about good parents doing where they're like, if you're like a big thing at like my high school was at least, is like if you're at a party and you're drunk and you need it out, like some parents would be like, just call me and I'll come get you, and like won't get you in trouble. Like, I'd rather you have me as an escape than like refuse to call me because you're worried that I'll get you in trouble and make things worse. And that feels like the energy Kelsey's going for here. She's like, I would rather he have like B to lean on than worry that she's going to snitch on him. And I'm like, that's good, but then I want that B's like, so do I help him? Like, do bad shit? And she's like, well, don't go that far. Like, it's just very funny.
Yeah. Yeah, it was quite funny. I wonder if it'll work out. It feels like the kind of structured, organized friendship that both B and Declan kind of need. Like,
yeah, I like
because neither of them would be that good at making friends. Like Declan would never make friends with B on his own, and B would never be friends with Declan on her own. But they kind of could work quite well together. So they need, a parent to organize a play date for them.
I'm glad. I was thinking the same thing. Like, because obviously the first thing Declan thinks is like that this is some arranged marriage, and there's the hilarious joke about how he's kind of not too far off the money with that. But like weirdly, I don't like ship Declan and B because they're too young or whatever, but like friend ship them, Like I actually think these two would be great for each other because they've got that like fun opposites thing going, kind of like Verona and Lucy, where it's like, she's too stuck up and needs help being normal. Declan is too casual and probably needs to get a bit more stuck up. And so they kind of round each other out in a fun way.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I also love, sorry, the whole time they're in Kennet Found and like people are taking turns giving these speeches, Sheridan just keeps popping in to just kind of be Avery's hype man. Like, Avery keeps sort of saying things and then Sheridan like overly backs her up. Like, she's this like kind of annoyingly good ally where like, it's like, here, Declan, why don't you just go explore Kennet Found? And then Sheridan sort of pipes in and is like, yeah, this is a place that Avery created by dropping a magical bomb on Kennet. And Avery keeps having to be like, that's not important. Like Sheridan is like doing too much work to make Declan take Avery seriously. It's very funny.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, so they get some advice from Raquel on how to talk to important people, and then they go to Wondercanned to talk to Milton. My friends call me Milton, 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 aka Milton, which is wild. Very fun that that's his actual name. What's Milton's story, man? Like,
there's a lot to talk about
who
here.
He is. Why is he a kid? Why is he Milton, Milton, Milton? Like, what happened here?
Yeah, like, see, this is the sort of like bad path Verona stuff that I'm talking about, because like, there's no way this guy was born Milton, 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 right? Like and like at this point, I'm partially suspecting that maybe Walbo's plan is every time this guy is mentioned, we reveal that there is an extra Milton in his name.
Yeah.
Like by the end of Pyre, it's just going to be about 30 to 50 Miltons.
Yeah.
Yeah, like these have to be augmentations. The Milton thing has to have been augmented by path shit.
Oh,
like he lost a name or something. And obviously the permanently being a kid thing is part of that too. But like this is the sort of shit I can see early story Verona getting wrapped up in, because these are like cool augmentations that must absolutely kind of fuck with yourself.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Maybe that's how he turned into a little kid, was just by being too much Milton.
I don't know why Too Much Milton sounds like one of those Disney Channel shows. Now I want to watch the like Disney Channel or like Nickelodeon Too Much Milton show about him like being management of a
Too much
path company.
Milton. That is what the show would be called. Too much Milton. I love it.
But yeah, I gotta say, I don't know how Wabo does it, but like, I've done campus tours of places like Google in Sydney and like Google and Facebook or Meta now in California, and Wabo nailed that vibe, like just like freakishly, like to the point where I'm like, did Wabo travel somewhere and do like fucking major tech company campus tours or something? Because all the little details. Like I remember when I was a high schooler and we did the campus tour of like Google Sydney. I don't know if you ever did this. I don't know if you did. What was it that NCSS school at any point? But like,
I have a friend who works at Google in Sydney, and I use their free
um,
lunch sometimes.
yeah, well, and like at least I toured it in like 2008, so this was their old campus. But they had like those like lolly walls that they have at like cinemas and stuff. They had one of those, so like with like all the scoops, it's like 100 different kinds of candy, and you get scoops and you just take. And they had like hammocks, so they're like, oh, you can take naps, and like 17-year-old Elliot was like, wow, this is heaven. This is the coolest place to work. But like, then I went to uni and started to meet people who work there, and they're like, oh, we don't really ever get to use that stuff because you've got to work.
Yeah, you got stuff to do.
Yeah, like, and like but it's all this stuff that's like clearly a trap and like presenting this great workplace to hide the fact that it's kind of soul destroying. And like I was just amazed at how much Wonder Canton nailed that vibe. Like this gave me flashbacks to touring, like the Google Sydney campus.
Yeah. But it sounds like the employees there are very high. They have very high retention because once you get lost, you can't leave. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, it's perfect. Like the parallels just work on every level. It's great. Like,
yeah,
people like because I think we've both had a number of friends who've worked at Google, and the people who stay there for a significant amount of time, I don't think are better for it. Most engineers I know have only stayed there for a couple of years.
Yeah.
I also I just want to call out, it was like there's all the like there's a bunch of little details though in Wondercan stuff that are like very fun, where Wildbow lets it leak out how horrible this place is. Like all the floors have names, and I loved how they're all very like hostile or colonial or something. Like the floors that we get names for, like procurement, arguments, disciplines, like that floor did not need to be called disciplines. It could have been called like specialties or something. Like disciplines is a very deliberate word choice, I think, for like Wondercan's floor that specializes in the different specialties of path practice.
Yeah, it's quite I mean, it's that exact flavor of corpo speak that's like cold to the point of being hostile, but kind of within the realm of plausibility enough that it's like, oh, it just means what it means. Like we didn't make up the word, kind of vibe.
Yeah, but they did.
Yeah, well, they picked it,
and Wildbow definitely did as well. We also learned about things like the cluster, and when I was in high school, we were taught when you're writing like essays and stuff that you can't introduce new ideas and points in the conclusion, and you lose marks if you do that. And I know this isn't really an essay, Pale, but like the epilogue is kind of the conclusion. And so I think we have to take marks off from Wildbow because it's just kind of rude to introduce something like the cluster as the story's ending and we're never going to get to see it. Like, I'm outraged.
Yeah.
I want and the epilogues have been full of this. I keep we met January, March might come back in like an epilogue or two, I think.
Yeah.
But we just keep meeting all these cool things. And it's like, no, Popo, it's the epilogue. You can't keep putting new cool things in because now I know we're not going to see them.
Yeah, as Wildbow's official English teachers, I think we have to mark Pale down from an A+ to just an A, and in red pen we write, stop introducing new ideas in your conclusions.
It's like, because obviously one of the catchphrases of this podcast has been, oh, but that's out of the scope of Pale. And then a lot of those things has not been out of the scope of Pale.
Yes.
But now I'm pretty sure I can say stuff like getting a chapter where we get to explore the cluster. That's probably out of the scope of Pale, and that's very upsetting.
Mm. I don't know. Go play Control, and you'll get close enough vibes, I reckon.
That's
You know,
true.
it's a magical home base, a magical research agency making a base out of a magical place is very iconic.
Well, and the paths are definitely the most like Jungian aspect of this universe, and that was what
Mm,
Control's definitely what Wondercand is trying to turn the paths into.
mm,
100%.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, the cluster's so cool. I love this idea of just like the garbage dump of the paths, even like it's the stuff that the paths hasn't managed to glue to anything else, and it's just like this giant trash heap.
Mm.
But not just physical things too. They're like, yeah, you could find a life that's lost in wartime and, tie that into your own. It's like whatever the fuck that means. Like, so cool.
It's crazy that they mine for stuff and they find a bunch of random junk, but then sometimes you find something so valuable.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
just like
yeah.
such a weird vibe.
I love that because it's kind of like that is the essence of the paths distilled, right? Is it's like
Mm,
a trash heap, and you're kind of wandering through to see if two things glued together in a cool way. Um, and so, honestly, the fact that you would mine the cluster rather than run paths kind of is this great example of Wondercand's version of path running, which is just to systematize it to absolute shit.
mm, yeah, yeah. So yeah, Milton offers Avery a pretty cool job, and she is a real jerk and turns him down to go into the family business.
I only had this thought right before we started recording, which is why it's written like this in my notes. But oh my god, they're trying to acquire the Kellys. That like
Yeah,
this is fucking Google acquiring the hot new startup.
I mean it totally is, right? I don't know. What do you think about the offer, Elliot?
It okay. Just to preface all my thoughts for the rest of it. We're definitely now reaching the point where it is very hard for me to talk about this chapter and not talk about my Pisces theories.
Mm,
Um, for very obvious reasons, and also some not so obvious ones, I'd say. But anyway, it's like I guess so. Leaving Pisces stuff behind, but like I'm worried it's going to leak. I like yeah I I kind of I would take this deal. I'm 100% stupid and arrogant enough to have taken this deal,
mm.
but Avery's 100% right in everything she says about how it's a bad idea. I just can
Nah,
see Elliot not being that smart, but
no,
like
Avery's wrong, and I'll tell you why, Elliot. I'll tell you why. Because Wondercand is offering Avery exactly what she wants, which is the chance to turn Wondercand into whatever she wants. I don't know, like in the real world that we live in, companies will promise things to you and then not really fulfill them, right? Like they'll say, "Oh yeah, you'll
sure.
totally have the power to reform that," blah blah blah. But then, I mean, as every kind of calls out, there's like pressures and stuff to not do that. But like, this is magic world. Here, a promise is binding. If they say to you, "Yes, you'll have the power to," literally, you could, Avery even says, "What if I wanted to like dismantle Wondercand?" And Milton said, well, he says like, "Oh, you wouldn't want to," but kind of implying, yes, you would be able to if you wanted to. I, I'm kind of like, that's like, that could be a binding promise, Avery. You can totally take it and do what you want to do. Like, I don't know. I'm kind
Yeah.
of like, I would totally take the deal, try and use that power to change things, and then, get subsumed by the system and fail to
Yeah,
make any lasting change.
fail completely.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I 100%. If this was the offer put in front of me, probably would make that exact same mistake too. But like, yeah, I agree. It does feel different because like when this happens in the real world, there's like an assumption I make that it's performative hire. Like if you're like, oh yeah, we're gonna hire
Yes.
Avery and give her all this ability to make change. I'm like, you're not really though, are you? Like
Yeah.
you're gonna say on paper, but every time her committee puts in a suggestion on how to be like how to be better, it's just gonna get ignored
Yes.
by the powers of it. And I mean, I see this all the time. We've had consulting firms come into my workplace, and because we do like a yearly employee survey, and our employee survey basically said that everyone hates our upper management. So upper management brought in consultants to talk to people to figure out what they could do better. The consultants did this big report, and fucking none of it's happened. And I'm just like so ready for next year's survey where I can lambast them for that. But
Mm.
um yeah, like you're right. Like they're kind of saying they will give her the power to do it. I guess like Avery's point that I think she's bang on the money for is like in this world and our world to a degree, but like it's very explicit in this world, like with this being like a judgeship, by becoming part of the system like that, it becomes harder for you to do these changes. Like the thing that jumps to my mind is things like Wondercand, I reckon, are like they don't need to sneakily undermine Avery or
No.
not deliver on their promises to undermine, like, because Wondercand as a machine is probably naturally designed to be immune to fuckery like that. Like there's this kind of natural selection that goes on in corporations as well as people. As like I imagine Wondercand as an institution is self-reinforcing enough that like Wondercand wouldn't have to be explicitly deceiving Avery to stop her from being able to change it, just because it is naturally self-reinforcing enough that like changes she tried to make just wouldn't work.
Mm.
So it's like I think it's the thing. It's like even if they're kind of being upfront about being willing to give her whatever power they can, it just still wouldn't mean anything.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I agree. I don't know. I'm kind of like, I just want to see what it would look like for Avery
Oh
to
yeah,
take it, you know?
I do also like Joff in the comments has just mentioned bring Verona in to consult, and I do love the idea of like fucking like sneaking Verona's bullshit into Wondercand via that way. So it's like Avery is a team leader. She has the ability to do whatever she wants. You bring in Verona, and Verona's gonna fuck shit right up. Like,
Yeah.
oh, look at this big system. Let me find some loopholes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I particularly love the line that Avery brings up where she's like, "This feels like a judgeship." Like, I think I'm starting to realize that past a certain point, when you get power, the world wants to put you in a certain position.
Mm.
Um, and I just imagined as Avery said that, somewhere in Can It Found, Miss was shedding a tear. Because that's such a miss sentiment. I did like this epilogue does a lot of stuff to wrap up like Kelly family vibes that we talked about, and like Avery's place in the world and her loneliness and stuff. But it's also I think this is probably the Miss epilogue as well, because like we obviously see bits of Miss's journey, and I think like Avery is becoming Miss 2.0 in a lot of ways in this chapter. It's moments like that, like where Avery has this realization at the end here, where she's like, "Oh, I don't want to get trapped in the system." I was just like, "That is so like Miss must be so happy."
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. It's very Avery is killing it. I mean, Avery's just killing
Yeah,
it, right? The Kelly family has now entered the field, and that's very fun.
yeah. Um, I, can we talk about? So Sheridan has this body count of 4, right?
Mm.
And there's obviously some hilarious body count jokes in there, which is very timely by Sheridan. I didn't think body count was really a term. It's a term I've only experienced in the last 6 months, I reckon. But
Yeah.
it's definitely bumped up in prevalence in the last year, I reckon. But regardless, she says her body count is 4,
Yeah.
and I was like,
Who's she
"That's
been?
crazy."
Yeah, who's she been kicking into the paths?
Yeah, who or what? I suppose I don't know. That has to be people, but like,
Mm.
yeah. So obviously, we saw her do Leonard, and we're
Mm-hmm.
fine. Like, we've all come to terms with that. That's cool.
Yeah.
She's dealt with it seemingly. What? How has she done it 3 other times? Like, this is crazy. Like, it's only been 3 months. Once a month, they're getting Sheridan to yeet some shit into the paths. Like,
Maybe
that's crazy.
maybe January March's practitioner rocked up to town and Sheridan was like, "Nope, sorry to your kid that you left with your grandma, but that ain't happening."
I'm loving chat suggestions. The trench coat mouse, Kira Lynn. Uh, yeah, I don't know.
um,
I also sorry, I love one of the things Milton brings up in this conversation, talking about the paths as a unit, is he's like the paths resist establishment. Like if they get too established, they fall to earth, becoming a founded territory like Can It Found, like blah blah, all sort of stuff we knew. But like then like the rest of the conversation is sort of about how Wondercand is trying to become synonymous with the paths and know everything and like have systematized the path. And I find this really interesting because this is like there's this weird paradox at the heart of Wondercand, and that they're like, yes, these are the spaces that resist establishment and aren't a part of any establishment, and our goal is to systematize understanding of them to the
yeah,
point where we kind of control them. And
yeah,
it's like do you not see how like weird that is like it's just, and I guess I'm not necessarily. Well, I mean, I am critical of that idea, obviously, but like I wouldn't bother labeling it as a criticism to them because I'm sure they're aware of it. And like similarly, like Avery's two aspects as a practitioner are she's obsessed with connections and she's obsessed with paths, and in some ways those things are as diametrically opposed as what Wondercand is talking about. So like paths and paradoxes go hand in hand. In fact, maybe the fact that Wondercand is leaning into something that doesn't make sense makes categorizing the paths easier.
Mm.
But it's just like yeah, it's just this fundamental thing where it's just like it's so gross that their thing is like, hey, look, the actual magical places, let's understand them completely so there's no mystery left.
Yeah. Yeah, it does run counter to what Avery and the Kellys want, but it's still kind of
Yeah.
cool. I don't know. I'm still kind of being like, yeah, that is kind of
Oh yeah.
cool.
In this world, I'd 100% fall into the trap of
Yeah.
working for Wondercand if they'd let me.
Yeah.
Because I mean that's the thing. Like they lure everyone in with the idea of like what is fun about the paths is exploring them.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
and Wondercan kind of gives you the ability to do that in the safest way. It's just like what's fun is the ending to this chapter kind of implies that Avery and her family are almost going the other way. Like Wondercan wants to bring the world to the paths. Like they're this corporate structure spreading organization into the paths, whereas the Kellys I think stand as their complete opposite. The Kellys are bringing the paths into the world.
Mm.
And Kenneth Found is obviously their primary example of that so far. Even though it's mostly Verona's, but like this Kelly Wondercand rivalry heating up could be very fun because they're kind of coming at the paths from the exact opposite ends. The Kellys bringing the paths to Earth, the Wondercand are bringing Earth to the paths.
Mm.
Um, yeah, like that's a fun rivalry being set up for a story we better fucking get.
6 more years of epilogues. Yeah.
I also sorry, I'm trying not to touch on any Pisces stuff.
Mhm,
Especially, I
mhm.
will say this chapter made me even more confident that my
That you're
theory
right.
is correct.
Yeah.
Um,
We're hearing about that theory in All Packed Up 2, BC Dubs. So if you wanna
yes,
know
yeah.
what Elliot is dancing around, come back. Come back for that.
It's been really hard not to talk about it this week. But I do love that Milton was like talking about the Page of Suns leading Wondercant to the constructions, and he was a bit like, "Yeah, I think the Page is on the fence." And I was like, "We've seen the Page talk to Avery. The Page fucking hates these guys. What do you mean he's on the fence? Like,
Mm.
I guess this guy's a relationship manager, so like being nice about hatred is woven into his DNA. Maybe literally at this point for him, but like I just had a good chuckle at Milton being like, "Oh, the Page of Sons is on the fence about us." No, he's not. He fucking hates you guys.
Yeah.
You must know that.
Yeah. So, I don't know. Maybe they are just delusional, or they think that they're gonna convince the page.
Yeah, I mean, like that's the thing that comes up here is they sort of say they're getting to the point where even if the page is actively working against them getting to the constructions, they'll probably be able to anyway.
Mm.
And that makes sense to me. And like again, this Kelly Wondercand rivalry that's being set up is like we maybe get a hint as to what Avery is thinking regarding the constructions. Like if I work on the assumption that Milton and Avery are both right on what the constructions are, what they both because they both say they've got ideas. Like if
Mm.
their ideas are the same as mine, and they're both, I think we get a subtle hint as to what Avery's thinking regarding what she wants to do with the constructions, and if that's right, it's really cool. Um, but yeah, like it's just like again, I want to see Kelly's versus Wondercand as a story. It'd be so fun.
Mm. Yeah, for sure.
Like I think they both have distinct ideas about what they want to do with the constructions, and they're so opposite. It's great.
Mm. Yeah. Um, so yeah, I mean, good
Yeah,
chapter. Good chapter, eh?
yeah. I almost like we've said that we're not doing a reflecting on loose ends episode, but
Mm.
God, a chapter like this makes me want that to exist because it's been really like this is a chapter where I think it was very clear what threads this one was sort of closing up, and it makes me want to like look at the epilogues as a whole unit at one point because it's just so fun to think about like how these chapters are tying multiple threads up together. Like this
Yeah.
one had all these like literal loose ties like the Milton talk and the finale to like we need to talk about Declan, but there's all these like character arcs wrapped up in this one, like Avery's loneliness and how she's been slipping through the cracks at points in her life, and like we see how that's not the case now. Like, not only does she have the voice now, but she's the one reaching out and helping others. Like, that's a role she's fitting into. She's become a healthier version of Miss, essentially.
Yeah.
And I also thought it was interesting. She's at the point we didn't talk about it, but a big thing in this chapter is Wondercand reaches out to her, and Avery is now confident enough to be like, "No, fuck you. Like, I don't need you." Whereas early story Avery was so desperate for friends, she would have said yes to Wondercand in a heartbeat. Like if Wondercand had promised her a team of friends, like you can be middle management and you'll have a team of friends, Avery would have taken
A
that.
team
No
of
worries.
friends. That's so funny. Yeah.
Like yeah, whereas like it's a big thing I think for Avery that like there's this like miss angle to it of her not wanting to be a part of the system, which is cool, and then it's also sort of like showing that yeah, like she's also got enough of her own purpose now. I think that's probably the other angle to this chapter is it's talking about the idea of purpose, and Avery realizes that she has a purpose and Wondercand would be antithetical to being a part of that.
Mm.
And yeah, just all the stuff with Miss I think is great. Like Avery was always Miss's like special little practitioner, her number one girl, and now Avery is sort of becoming Miss but cooler, and it's just like these are all such fantastic threads to tie up together as well. Like sort of tying up some of the stuff with Miss, Avery's loneliness, Declan, Wondercand, like they all blend together so perfectly. It's such a great epilogue.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's really good. Another great epilogue. So yeah, what do you think? We're going to get 3 seasons later next?
Yeah, I assume so.
Because it feels like we have to have 3 years later as the final one.
Oh
right?
yeah, that's. I assume the last one's going to be 3 years later, and we'll have 3 seasons in between then.
Seasons,
And I think
yeah.
like there was some talk last week, like Walbo sort of explicitly set that up in the story too. But yeah, I'm trying to think, who was last week's Verona?
Yeah, last week was Verona.
I'm trying to think. I'm trying to predict who I think would get 3 seasons. Like, I guess it's a Lucy's turn, but that's never been a good way to go about this.
Yeah, I could see.
Yeah, I don't know.
Lucy,
Yeah.
and then
I mean, this sort of leads into my. We didn't have any predictions this week. It's weird. People aren't predicting what's happening next in the story anymore for some
I wonder
reason.
why. Yeah.
So I think we've both pulled out Reddit comments, and I pulled out a Reddit comment by Tycho Brohe, who's saying basically they just hope we'll get an epilogue that's in Verona's Wandering Bookstore.
Mm.
We obviously had the teaser with like the night markets, and they want to see like where Verona's bookstore is later on. And I was like, it hadn't occurred to me, but now that I've read that, I was like, there's no way that's not happening. And I just don't know whether it's going to be 3 seasons or 3 years later that we see Verona's bookstore.
Good
but I'm
question.
like, there's just like, I don't know if it'll be the focus of the whole chapter, but there's no way there's not at least a scene in Verona's Wandering Bookstore, surely.
Yeah. I think we'll get it all. I think we'll get it all epilogue. I can't imagine the 3 years later isn't here's a glimpse at all the Kennedys. I mean, I guess we don't need it to be an all epilogue to get that. We can just have it be Verona or like, Avery visiting Verona and Lucy and then doing some kind of Bay stuff, whatever.
What if Verona's got her wandering bookstore? Like, if it's literally wandering throughout the chapter, that could give her opportunities to catch up with various people.
Yeah, true.
3 years later, I really like as well, because if it's 3 years later, that presumably means that we're back at January. So that means January, March might be a thing again. I kind of love the idea of like the final chapter being celebrating the
final
anniversary.
Epilogue will be from the perspective of January, March. That's what we want.
But yeah, it's going to be the 3 years later is going to be so weird though, like because like the Kennedys are going to be like 17 at that point, and like that breaks my brain. Like they'll have like gone through puberty and shit. Like they're going to be completely different people. Like this whole story, even to this epilogue, has been under a year.
Yeah,
like cutting 3 years ahead. Like
it's going to be a big departure. Hey.
Yeah, and like an interesting writing challenge for Walbo too, I imagine, because like that must be weird to transpose voices through like a pretty significant 3 years of development, especially given the last year they've just had. Like like even aside from where they are or what they're doing, I think just capturing the change in their voices is going to be weird, and it's going to be weird. Like for me, I'm not. It's going to be like a struggle not to picture like. we've spent 3 years reading the story, picturing them as like 14-year-olds. It's almost going to be hard for me to like in my head not just have like a 14-year-old saying the lines that they say. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It's just, it's weird.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, for my Reddit comment, I put out a comment by Old Lace One, and they did talk a bit about the chapter, but the part that I wanted to pull out was they called out the durian tuna protein bar that Smudge pulled out of his pocket at some point and said, I know this combo is supposed to sound disgusting, but speaking as somebody who's actually eaten that combination before, it's really good, actually.
What are you talking about, Old Lace?
Yeah,
Where have you had that?
Wild. That's maybe the craziest thing we've ever talked about on this podcast. So yeah, speaking of which, All Packed Up 2 is coming up, and Elliot will be eating a durian and tuna combo.
Okay.
So put that on the list, Elliot.
Yeah, I mean, I will. You forget, I don't really have a sense of smell, so I'm not the loser in the scenario where you're introducing durian to the mix.
Yeah, and tuna, it's not great either.
Oh yeah, tuna smells as well. Yeah. See, like I'm bad at this. No, I think these were like weirdly all real combos of stuff. I don't know if this is a thing, but like,
yeah, I can see that.
cricket and coffee bean is a thing I've seen before. So like, yeah, and there's something that came up a few weeks ago where I was like shocked that it was a real food thing. It was a lost thing from like 4 weeks ago. Strawberry basil, that was it. Thank you, Walter. That is admittedly a step below the weirdness of the ones pitched in this week's chapter, but yeah. Did I tell you I found some vegetarian pate as well?
You told me. We never really followed up that conversation, which I was very happy with that being the status.
It looks gross. There's recipes to make your own vegetarian pate.
Why would you want
like,
that? I don't know. Yeah.
Well,
now feta and
pate-
watermelon, that's a good combo. That actually works pretty well.
Yes, yeah.
Cottage cheese and peanut butter, that's a classic one that I always thought was so weird, but actually works really well.
Vegemite and peanut butter.
No way. Vegemite and peanut butter. Are you kidding me?
We had a thing in my house when we were kids where we would call it vaginamite and penis butter.
That's hilarious.
Just because we're good at humor, obviously. And I very nearly, just saying them together, like Vegemite and then peanut butter, almost made me revert to calling it penis butter.
That's
but yeah. So anyway, yes. Peanut butter and Vegemite is, I think, a bird. One like is the one who got me onto that. Like, obviously, the member of the wild bird community got me to try it, and it's surprisingly good.
A magpie dropped a penis butter and Vegemite sandwich outside your house.
It is swooping season again. I've had a few close calls.
Had a few swoops. You got to get your zip tie bike helmet out.
No, I've just been like trying to keep my head to the ground and like wear the same clothes so that they realize that it's still me.
Yeah,
but yeah.
Well,
anyway.
that's thanks, folks, for leaving your Reddit comments. If anyone has a prediction about, the remaining few chapters of the story, then you can find our Pale Predictor form linked in the show notes down below. That's where you can also find the place to answer our discussion question. Now, we had a discussion question last week, Elliot, but nobody's been able to answer it, so we're going to roll it on, I think.
Yeah, that's my bad. Again, I'm sorry to everyone for not publishing the episode. If it helps, it's just because I'm an idiot.
Yeah, that helps.
Yeah. So, yeah. Well, I mean, it was already kind of a half discussion question anyway.
Yes.
We're just asking, what's your favorite Otherverse meme? You can answer that on Reddit, and you can also answer it on the doofmedia.com/contribute page that Ruben's mentioned, because we're obviously going to be doing an Otherverse meme contest, I think, in All Packed Up 2. That's what that's for.
Yes, exactly right. So yeah, we'll be sorting through those, ranking them, and naming the best Otherverse meme during the stream. So yeah, head to doofmedia.com/contribute to leave that. You can find the links to all this stuff in the show notes down below our discussion thread, and the links to the contribute page there.
Yeah, and just a reminder, again, it doesn't have to be your meme that you made. Like, obviously that's great if it is, but like the form is set up so that you can like say, hey, somebody else made this meme, here's their details. I loved it. So we're just looking to crown what is the funniest Otherverse meme, basically.
Yeah. If you want to find out more about all the great shows on the Duff Media Network, you can head to duffmedia.com. There's all kinds of info on, well, Pale in Comparison, I suppose, which is very close to ending. I think, what have they got? One more episode left now?
Yeah, I think they're ending this weekend. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Their story is lame because it only has one epilogue.
It's a good one though.
It is a good one. It is a good one.
That was the first written thing that ever made me cry.
Oh, really?
The Pact epilogue, yeah.
That got me too, but I had a few years previously read Marcus Zuzak's The Book Thief, which was the first book that made me cry. Anyway, books, they're good. They're fun. So support us talking about them by going to patreon.com/duffmedia and support Wildbow making them by going to patreon.com/Wildbow.
Even more importantly than people talking about them, it's people writing them in the first place.
Let's not go that far, Elliot. We provide a valuable service to people by reading and talking about work that somebody else has done creatively, okay?
Yeah, but imagine the world where that hasn't happened. What would this podcast look like? Pale Reflections without Pale?
Nah.
It would be that 40 minutes of silence you were talking about.
Nah. The world could get by without books. The world could not survive without podcasts about books, and we all know that's true. Anyway, Elliot.
I'm just trying to imagine, like, it never came up, but imagine if there was a week where Wildbow had taken a week
off. Yeah, what would
would we have followed that? Or what would our episode be?
I feel like I would have pushed us to do an episode on somehow of just I don't know what. just the, I guess, the bits in the intro and outro where we talk shit.
Anyway.
Elliot, why don't you hit us with that classic sign off that we hear every week?
There's going to be some silence to edit out here because I forgot to do this.
Come on, man. Come
on. Hey, baby, are you from the Deep Warrens? Because you can mongle my flesh anytime.